So, Unavaatu, the most powerful character in all of Avatar, or a total meathead? Why not both? Hey guys, my name is Antoine, and today I am starting a new series where I am going to be grading all the Avatar characters to decide where they stack up among all the rest. Today, we will take a look at one of, if not the strongest entity in Avatar, Unavaatu during Hermetic Convergence. We'll do this by looking at a few key items and coming up with a final grade. Those items, along with their time codes, are as follows. So a few highlights of the character. He is a fusion of Vaatu and Unalaq, previously known as the Dark Avatar after the demise of Rava and made to be a giant known as Unavaatu. He was created during Hermetic Convergence, a spiritual time period that only happens every 10,000 years. So this character comes from my least favorite season of Avatar with my least favorite finale and my least favorite combatants. Cosmic Korra, pure positive energy versus Unavaatu, pure negative energy. Not really my jam. But I'd like to think I can separate my ability to assess fighting abilities separate from entertainment value, or lack thereof. So with these grading videos, I like to look at a character's reputation. However, with a character like Unavaatu, that doesn't quite work as he is an entirely new being, never before seen prior to Hermetic Convergence during the era of Korra. That said, we do have Vaatu's innate reputation being darkness incarnate, capable of bringing the world to its knees for potentially 10,000 years. That sort of statement is sort of nebulous, of course, as we never saw what a world like that would be in a practical sense, but take that as you will. It's basically darkness for a bunch of years, so that has to be pretty powerful. Now, when we get to accolades, it's the same as what we have with reputation, in the sense that we don't really have much from either the lore or from other in-world characters. So that one's pretty nebulous as well. Our best form of assessing Unavaatu in our next video, Cosmic Korra, will come purely on the back of scaling off of Unavaatu himself, who has a few more feats than Korra, as he was running around making a mess of things in Republic City before Cosmic Korra came into the scene. From what we've seen from Unavaatu, his ability to create tidal waves on a whim, his ability to tank military cannons, and his capacity to harness pure energy beams puts him at the very top of the combative power scale within Avatar. So, as a hypothesis of my conclusion, considering Unavaatu's abilities, especially that of his pure energy beam, which is the strongest form of destructive power we've seen in the series, though Kuvira's giant mech might have something to say on that, more on that later, I think it's safe to hypothesize that Unavaatu would achieve a grade of SS+, or, in my number scale, a score of 97 to 100. With dexterity, we have several giant fighters we've seen before in the series, which I'll speak about further along in this grading series. From enormous mechs, Koizillas, and Iron Giants, but until Cosmic Korra and Unavaatu, we haven't seen big fighters with such fluidity. They do not lumber around like typical giants, but rather walk as unencumbered as their much smaller counterparts. As an example, Unavaatu was able to pull airplanes out of the sky, and considering these airplanes are earlier models, I would liken them to what we saw in our own real world in World War I, where those planes were going at approximately 100 miles per hour. So, Unavaatu's dexterity is such that he can pull 100-mile-per-hour airplanes out of the sky with his tendrils with little to no effort. Speaking on his tendrils in terms of his dexterity, we've seen him use them for general balance when he lifted himself from Yue Bay. Now, of course, he was doing this after he got slammed down, but in a more mobile-based fight, it can be assumed, and I don't think it's much of a reach, to say that he would be able to use them for better balance, much like Ming-Hua uses her water-bending octopus form during her fights. Now, in terms of his worst showings of dexterity, that comes by way of Cosmic Korra. When it comes to straight hand-to-hand combat, Unavaatu gets beat down by Cosmic Korra pretty handily, which makes sense in their base forms, as Korra would be a superior martial artist to Unalaq. Even when Unavaatu attempted to leverage his advantage with his tendrils, that didn't do him much good to bridge the gap. In terms of strength, Unavaatu treads through Yue Bay like he's wading through a pool. That means he's casually walking through 300 to 400 tons of water at a casual gait. For context, that's around 200 cars worth of weight. Unavaatu also pulls down a Statue of Liberty-sized statue of Aang, which would be around 125 tons. Now in terms of his fortitude, Unavaatu tanks fire cannons from advanced United Forces frigates with no signs of damage. In context, Koizilla did take minimal damage from more antiquated versions of Fire Nation ships. Unavaatu also survives getting hit by Cosmic Korra going at Mach speeds from the Spirit World to Yue Bay. Now in terms of his worst showings of fortitude, while fighting Cosmic Korra, he's thrown into a mountain which stuns him but does not incapacitate him completely. But this is really his only form of bad showings. So in conclusion, ultimately, outside of Cosmic Korra being his better if we're looking purely at physicality and martial skill, Unavaatu still scales in the high 90s of my grading scale, landing him a grade of SS+ within the parameters of his physical capabilities in a fight. So in terms of non-combative bending ability, his tendrils had been used to create hypergrowth from the earth, as used against the coast of Republic City, and we see that actually progress through Book 3 of Legend of Korra. With time, this could hypothetically be used in combat to trap an opponent, but since we've never actually seen this used, there's only so much assumption we can make on that front. Much in the same way that Aang has the ability to take away one's bending, Unavaatu possesses the ability to subdue any of his spirit-based enemies with forced pacification, which has only been surpassed by Cosmic Korra herself. Now in terms of his worst showings, he was taken down by Cosmic Korra's spirit energy after Cosmic Korra got assistance from Jinora to uncover Rava within Unavaatu. The reason this is classified as non-combative is the same reason energy bending in the form of removing one's bending is non-combative. It can only be effectively used when an opponent is whittled down. It's not something that can be implemented actively within the confines of combat, at least from what we've seen. So let's move over to combative bending grade. First, I want to establish that combative bending is more important than non-combative bending, especially when we're looking at this in the context of a fight. Now in terms of Unavaatu's best showings, we can see that his energy beam can cut through metal and obliterate landscapes. He also has tsunami level water bending as a basis, and in terms of precision attacks, his tendrils are used to grab and control. In terms of his worst showings, his tendrils were subverted by Cosmic Korra's superior martial skill, and his energy beam was overpowered by Cosmic Korra. Though this might have occurred more so because Cosmic Korra was fresher than Unalaq at the time, versus Cosmic Korra just being generally more powerful. In terms of combative bending conclusion, I would say that Unavaatu should land himself into another high 90s score, somewhere in that SS+ grade for his combative bending ability. Not so much by way of skill or precision, but because of his sheer destructive scale being above any other form of bending. Okay, so let's move on to mental capacity. We'll look at strategy and tactics. In terms of Unavaatu's strategy, there really isn't much to it. He's a typical villain, taunting to put fear in opponents' hearts. He does this briefly to Cosmic Korra when she's down and out, but I don't see this as much of a point in his favor. And I say that because it seems like his strategy is just pure devastation with no real thought. But who really needs forethought, I guess, when you have that much power? And in terms of his tactics, when he was faced with an equal adversary in Cosmic Korra, there was no sense of change in tactic, something that was opposed to Unalaq's own style. And Unalaq is the basis of Unavaatu, and Unalaq is a much smarter fighter than his giant counterpart. For me, this comes by way of plot-induced stupidity or needing to have the hero save the day. Or if we try to do headcanon, we can say that all of Unalaq's previous intellect went out of the window the moment he fused into the giant version of Unavaatu because of dark energy or whatever you want to say. Because even when he was in his normal Dark Avatar state, he was outfighting Korra mostly through superior tactical skill of his bending rather than brute strength of power. So, in my conclusion of his mental capacity, this is the one category where I would give this character an absolutely mediocre grade in the 50s. But this grade doesn't ultimately end up mattering because of the power scaling observed prior to this point. Alright, so let's move on to lethality and morality grade. Being a fusion of both Unavaatu and Vaatu, there is no real morality cap for this character. They would go after anyone and anything without remorse, so their lethality grade would be a perfect 100 SS+ levels easily. So as a final grade, I think the hypothesis holds up that Unavaatu is clearly a top tier fighter. Thanks to the ultra-specific circumstances of Hermetic Convergence, he achieves an enhanced power not only with his human-derived waterbending, which is only matched by the likes of Koizilla, more on that later, but also his capacity to generate pure energy beams, which are perhaps only matched by Kuvira's mech. Again, more on that later. The two advantages he holds over the giant spirit monster and oversized mech is his superior dexterity, mobility, and fortitude. And the only other being who could give him a legitimate run for his money, because, well, she already did, is Cosmic Korra, who we'll dive into in our next video in this series. All said, I would put Unavaatu in the 99 to 100 category, or in graded terms, an SS class character. And that's it! Do you agree that Unavaatu is at the top tier of all Avatar characters we've seen in the franchise? Or do you think I overrated him quite a bit? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, peace, love, and remember, be water, my friends.